And welcome to this week's edition of DawgDial. I'm your host, Paul Maharry, joined by my trusty co-host, Jake Roos of UGAsports.com. And we've got a lot to talk about this week, folks. Tons of things happening in the world of UGA athletics in terms of the football team. A couple guys transferring. One player was arrested. And spring practice is well on its way to quickly becoming a thing here in Athens. Also, Georgia Bulldogs are on their way to the NIT, playing Belmont. It's going to be a good game, maybe. And then, the big matchup is if Georgia Tech can make it into the second round, Georgia Tech will have to come to Athens and play the Bulldogs. So, Jake, without further ado, it's been a crazy little week so far for Georgia in terms of making news.
Yeah, it has. And, I think that this is the kind of stuff that, obviously it happens about every year around this time. The kids are getting restless in between the spring ball, so you have those run-ins with the law right after spring break and such. And then, obviously, you follow that up too with the transfer news, which is probably the biggest news that Georgia's had in some time. Not totally surprising, but really makes it an interesting spring and then fall that we've got ahead of us.
Indeed, and we're going to discuss all of that when we come back from this quick commercial break. You're listening to DawgDial, presented by UGAsports.com.
Paul, two things. If you could keep your Red Bull off the table, and if you don't have to use it, bring your laptop screen down some.
Okay. Cool. All right, guys, we appreciate look at the questions rolling in, guys. We couldn't ask for anything more. We're definitely going to get to all of those on this show. So here we go. And 3, 2, 1. And welcome back to DawgDial. I'm your host, Paul Maharry, joined by my trusty co-host, Jake Roos of UGAsports.com. And, Jake, we opened up the show with some big news for Georgia. Speaking of transfers, not only did Reggie Wilkerson decide to transfer from the program, quarterback Brice Ramsey / punter Brice Ramsey decided to transfer as well. And that's a scary thought. I know that he wasn't in line to start for Georgia at the quarterback position or anything like that, but now you have two scholarship quarterbacks on your roster, one of them being a sophomore and one of them being a true freshman. That's a scary, scary thought.
It is. That's a little bit tough, I think, for everybody involved. You don't ever really want that to be the situation. The good news is, hey, that sophomore, pretty well versed in the ways of the
Sure.
SEC. So you've got a guy who's experienced. It's not like this is a quarterback room totally void of any leadership or any ability to kind of conceptualize what's in store for the fall. Obviously, that's what Jacob Eason's that's one of his primary selling points, I think, at this point about his game is that he went through the entire season last year and really showed that he was the guy. But conversely, you've got Jake Fromm, who I'll be honest with you, I don't know, and I know we're going to talk about what kind of action he's going to see, but a guy that is definitely chomping at the bit to get into the play in the SEC. He's ready to take the field, and I guarantee you, if he gets it snap one a game one, it won't be enough to rattle him up. You know what I'm saying? But it does. It's a bad situation from the scholarship numbers because you want to be able to kind of keep those things in line, keep everything balanced up. Having a guy like Brice is a huge luxury. I mean, it's obviously a tough spot for that player to be in, which is why I'm sure no one really begrudges him for the decision he's made. Georgia recruited around him, and it was not only that, but it was situations where he just never had a chance really to seize the job. Grayson Lambert comes in, Jacob Eason comes in. It's clear that he was not their answer. Yeah. And so it's hard to blame the guy for that. That being said, there's something to having an experienced long-term backup, a guy who knows your system kind of in and out, can get in there and run around, do some things. And make no mistake, I think Brice actually brought a few things to the table that these guys don't necessarily. He's a little bit better of a runner, I think, than either one. Overall, though, I think that it's It's a tough situation for Brice. I get why he did what he did. I wish him nothing but the best. Hope he goes on and has some great success at his next stop. I have no doubt that he can, and if he finds the right fit, I think that he's a very talented player and a guy who can contribute to a team somewhere. So hope he gets that opportunity to do so. Hate it didn't work out at Georgia, but that's the way the cookie crumbles.
That is the way the cookie crumbles, but for Georgia fans, this is a little bit alarming in the sense that, he was pretty much slated to be your backup quarterback. Let's rephrase that. Jake Fromm probably could have been the backup quarterback. I think the Georgia coaches really wanted to redshirt him, though, and kind of get that class separation between him and Eason, so they could have a quarterback for the next 6 years, 7 years that they really know that they wanted and they could run this offense. With that being said, now Brice Ramsey no longer there, so if, let's say, Jacob Eason were to, hurt his ankle, he had to be out a couple plays, they had to wrap it up. Who are you going to throw in there now? Do you burn that red shirt from Fromm, or do you look at a guy maybe like Sam Vaughn, who's been in the program? He is a walk-on.
Yeah.
But he's worked with the scout team the past couple years. Do you look at Sam Vaughn, or do you just say, you know what? It's bound to happen at some point. We're going to blow out a team potentially. Well, we thought that with Nichols last year, but that didn't happen. But there's going to be a Nichols-type game where they're going to be up 50 points at some point, I would imagine, with this team. And what do you do at that point? You can't leave Eason in there in the fourth quarter, so where do you turn?
I don't think, though. I think that, in my opinion, you don't blow that red shirt unless it's absolutely necessary, unless you're in a situation where Jacob's injured or – God forbid that were to happen.
Well,
you'd be especially thin. But
so you're saying if it's 21-17 against an Auburn
bring
or Georgia
in
Tech,
bring in somebody. Bring in Sam Vaughn. Bring in Parker.
If it's 21-17?
Oh, I'm sorry. No. And what happens?
I'm saying you bring in Fromm at that point, right?
No, I leave Eason in if it's 21-17.
Well, no, Eason's hurt. Let's say he's hurt.
Oh, yeah, then you bring Fromm in.
Okay,
sure.
But if it's a 50-0 game, then you would bring in Vaughn.
Sure,
okay.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah. No, totally. But bring in. You got a guy like Parker McLeod also, who was at Alabama at one time, got a little bit of eligibility left after transferring in from Western Kentucky. So you've got a couple of guys who have been around the program. They know what they're doing. Maybe not as highly touted coming out as a guy like Brice was, but I think that you're going to not necessarily be in a situation where you run into this problem. Another thing I think I would consider doing very highly, and I'm sure it's something that they've talked about, is kind of cross training one of these new enrollees, one of these freshmen.
Who?
Maybe Trey Bishop is a guy I would look at. Trey Bishop is not a guy that I think is going to redshirt in year one. I think he's going to see the field, and Auburn was recruiting him to play quarterback. He played it for his high school football team. He can get out there and run around. He can do some different things for you. If you're not going to spend the red shirt on him anyway, go ahead and teach him how to do it. Go ahead and have him ready to go and in the pocket. And here's the thing. Maybe it's not his thing. Maybe he's not great at it. Maybe it doesn't work out. But at least test it out. Because like I said, I think that they had planned to play him anyway. In my opinion, you save that red shirt on Fromm at all costs.
I'm loving it. I totally forgot about Trey Bishop, man. And Trey Bishop's my dude.
Yeah.
So there you go. Yeah, yeah, sure. That sounds great.
Yeah,
I really like that.
Well, and the other, there are guys out there that
Nicole Hardman did it in at Elbert.
Terry Godwin's done it.
Yeah.
I mean, those are not necessarily the guys I would want doing it, just because they're smaller kind of guys, and really not the. I don't know. They're not true quarterbacks.
Yeah.
They've been focused on other things for so long. Trey's coming in like a mold, like a ball of clay, man.
Yes.
I mean, with the fresh experience, he's going to probably play some cornerback, maybe some safety, but give him some looks over there, man. You need some depth there, and there's no reason not to have a guy with his skill set, his size, and his talent.
They're pretty much trying to recruit him for the 2018 class.
Oh, absolutely.
Sure, so why not try it out?
Those guys are a little more polished.
Yeah, okay. You don't have to kill my Trey Bishop hopes. Okay, guys, we're coming right back. This is DawgDial presented by UGASports.com. I don't know if you guys saw it on Facebook, but when Jake said Trey Bishop, immediately a light bulb. Right above my head.
I saw it.
I mean,
sitting next to you.
God, I didn't even think about that.
Well, that's why I'm the brains of this operation.
I'm a huge Trey Bishop fan, guys. And you know what? Georgia's fine.
And that's the thing. He wanted to do it. Auburn convinced him that it was what he was going to do. So it's not like he doesn't lack the desire to do it. Is he the answer?
No.
Not in the long term.
No.
But he can help you out. Sure.
Mitchell Davis says squad goals. Appreciate that. Appreciate that.
All right, so let's touch on this Reggie Wilkerson thing.
And Riley Ridley.
Yeah.
Let's touch on both of them.
All right. What is this, 12?
This is 12.
All right.
Here we go. 3, 2, 1. And welcome back to DawgDial. I'm your host, Paul Maharry, joined by my trusty co-host, Jake Roos of UGAsports.com. And we talked about Brice Ramsey transferring out of the University of Georgia program. I probably could speak for Jake. We wish him nothing but the best. Hopefully he can land at a school where he can actually play quarterback, get out there for a season. I know that it's been a really rough time for him at the University of Georgia. Just like Jake said, he's kind of been recruited over, and he never really got to play. So hopefully for him, he can have that one final year to where he can, go out, play, and hopefully prove a lot of people wrong, wherever he lands. I've heard rumors of UNC potentially. I would imagine it'd probably be a little smaller school than that. But wherever he goes, I hope the best for him, and he does what he does.
If I'm Mike Bobo, I'm giving him a call. Why not?
You did for Fatone Bada.
Sure, exactly. Go out there, give it a shot. Go hang out in Fort Collins. Hey, it's beautiful if nothing else. It's a wonderful place to be. A lot of familiar faces out there for him, guys he knows really well, and probably give him a good chance to succeed. I don't know that that's where he's going to end up, but I think a situation like that would be good.
I think they have a really good quarterback at Colorado State. It's the only reason why I think he might not go there. And the reason I follow them, there's a guy from Monroe, Georgia, Michael Gallup, one of their wide receivers, my alma mater. He's killing it out there. So congrats to him. Back to Georgia football. That's what you want to hear about. Reggie Wilkerson. Jake, he has been on the team, I think, before I graduated college. And that's been like 4 or 5 years now.
Yeah.
He's been on the team for a very long time. I mean, God bless him. He had injuries that kept him out. And when I found out he was transferring, I was like, oh, he's still enrolled at Georgia. I think when he came out, I remember watching his film. It was really when I was getting into recruiting pretty heavily. And I was like, this kid looks really good. He looks like the real deal. He's got the size. He's got everything that you need. And it just didn't work out for him. So, Jake, another body down in the DB department. That's 4 now. That's Rico McGraw, Jawan Briscoe, Shaq Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
And now was it Shaq Wilson?
Yeah, Shaq Wilson.
Yeah. And now it's Reggie Wilkerson.
Don't question yourself, buddy.
Okay.
You're good.
That's 4 guys down in that defensive backfield. Now it's starting to make a little more sense why they went out and grabbed 17,000 defensive backs on signing day.
Yeah, and I think when I was kind of thinking about this before the show, to me the Wilkerson situation, not necessarily it didn't play out the same way, I guess, that the Ramsey situation did at quarterback, but a guy who ran in, like you said, to some unfortunate circumstances and ended up just getting recruited over in the end, and he never really found a home at Georgia in terms of where he was on the field.
Yeah, he always was playing different defensive back positions.
Yeah. He was a guy that they tried everywhere. He let me tell you. I mean, if you were to draw a picture of what you think a defensive back looks like, I mean, Reggie Wilkerson.
Absolutely.
I mean, he's got the look physically. But it was time, I think, to possibly explore some options. Honestly, I'm a little surprised he hasn't until now. I think that last year would have even been a good opportunity for him to have done that. So I think that overall, not too shocking on Reggie. Like you said, it makes sense. They brought in 7 guys this year, made it pretty clear that they were moving in a totally different direction from what they got last year. I think if you're not a guy who saw significant playing time last year, and I'm talking in the defensive backfield, if you're not Aaron Davis and Malcolm Parrish and Dominic Sanders,
you're getting recruited over.
Yeah, somebody else is probably coming for your job. And even those guys, nothing's safe. We know that. I mean, if D'Angelo Gibbs, Richard LeCount come in here and they put the hurt on, I got no problem saying that they'll take those spots if they put in the work, and those guys know it. But Reggie Wilkerson, hey, You talk about damn good dogs.
Yeah.
A guy who put in a yeoman's effort. I mean, a guy who came in, did what was asked of him, had some struggles, had some things, but never a guy you heard about out in the media. Wasn't causing problems.
Nope.
Wasn't, seemed like a guy who was a good teammate.
That's what I said. I forgot he was on the team.
Yeah,
you don't. And that's not to be in a bad way.
Right.
You don't hear anything bad about him either.
Sure.
So
and hey, that's its own sort of currency.
Correct. And speaking of that type of currency, let's go ahead and move on past Reggie Wilkerson. Hopefully for him, it turns out good for him.
Hey,
just the same for Ramsey.
I'm thinking, and again, I got no inside information on this. I hope that Reggie ends up maybe a little closer to home. He's a Florida boy.
UCF, maybe USF,
there's
something like that.
There's some good schools down there. Hey, maybe Lane Kiffin calls him up. Who knows?
Hot dog. And speaking of being in the news for a bad reason, well, Georgia came back from spring break, and like every Georgia football spring break, there is not a week where I've been covering this beat for a pretty long time. You have as well. I'm riding the bull. And Anthony Dasher have as well. I don't think there's probably ever been a spring break where there hasn't been at least one arrest. And if there hasn't, that's few and far between.
Yeah, and if there's not, there's always been some controversy some pictures or a video. Or, there's always something. There's always something.
But they're college kids, so. But yeah, Riley Ridley got busted with marijuana here in Athens. Story broke by our own Anthony Dasher right after that, and then a little bit more leaked out on the subject. Apparently, they took it over state lines from Florida, and it was in little separate baggies and things like that. So he was lucky to get off with what he did.
Why? What are you implying? It seems like you know a lot about drugs.
Ah, indeed. No, but hopefully for him. Our own Anthony Dasher covers the team. He's been doing a fantastic job of it for umpteen million years, and he's saying that he doesn't think that the whole one-game suspension thing is going to play into here. And when Anthony Dasher speaks, I listen, Jake, because he doesn't just say that, okay? Sure. He's got a ton of people on UJSports.com that rely on him for accurate information, and he says that. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm tending to agree with Dash on this one, and what's your take on it?
Obviously an unfortunate situation. You never want a guy, getting out there for the Fulmer Cup and getting things started. Man. But, hey, of all the things in the world for a guy to get busted for, this is pretty low on the totem pole. I gotta say, having a little bit of weed on you is not the end of the world. Yeah. I mean, we've seen
BB guns.
We've seen BB guns. We've seen
falling
guys
asleep at the wheel.
Not asleep, buddy. Passed out at the wheel.
Comatose.
You've got rape scandals going on at other places and things like this. And I don't mean to say all infractions are bad infractions. You never.
That's why they're called infractions.
Yeah, you never want to get in trouble for anything, but. All things considered, this is the kind of thing that a guy can bounce back from pretty easily. We've seen, if you'll remember, Natrez Patrick was a guy who
that was
very early on. Yeah, he got a couple times actually. Very early on in his career, had some run-ins with some marijuana and the police, but it ended up kind of teaching him a lesson, made him a little stronger, got him back, got him focused on the right track, and really that's how these things go. It's one of two ways because if you'll also remember when he got busted the first time he was with Chauncey Rivers.
Correct.
And Chauncey Rivers obviously chose a different path, continued to get busted for those things, and seemed like maybe a guy who didn't necessarily have his priorities, I guess, in line. Thought about he was focusing on something else other than football.
Yeah.
Ridley, I think for him, this isn't a good thing necessarily, but it's not the worst thing that could have ever happened.
Crow out with a gun?
It's not going to ruin his life. It's not going to ruin his career. And it gives him a chance to kind of, know that there are consequences for his actions. And one of the things that he tried to do, it's mentioned in the police report was he was like, oh, I'm an athlete.
Yeah.
Let me call somebody and this will all move a lot smoother. You've got to realize that doesn't buy you anything in the real world.
It might, where his brother goes to school in Tuscaloosa.
No, come on.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying. It's the kind of situation with that where these guys they get it. It's a life lesson. A big life lesson, I think, to learn. You're young, you're in school, you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders. You got a million people telling you you're the greatest. there is a sense of invincibility. I mean, you have to kind of feel that, I think, to be successful and to thrive in this game. And I don't think that was necessarily – I think that, like I said, this is a situation Riley can take, he can learn from, he can build off of it. And hey, if I'm Kirby – I'm setting him up with Nate Patrick, and I'm saying, hey, man, well, you help this guy out. Show him the way. Show him how you bounce back from something like this and clean that image up. And if in Nate case, show him how you become an NFL draft pick one day.
I think one of the biggest things in these scenarios when a kid gets busted for something like this, it's the media coverage that comes upon it and kind of the shame that goes with it. And I think that scares a lot of these kids off from doing it again, just for the simple fact that they don't like being in the news for this. And you could make that argument. There's the argument that whether this should be, a thing that's legal or not, that's a completely separate argument. People talk about it all the time. But what's in place right now is the NCAA doesn't allow it. Georgia has a policy against that, and It's a one-game policy. I don't think he sits out against Notre Dame. I think he's too big of a weapon. I think that they're going to try to handle this internally as much as possible if they can. I promise you Kirby Smart has already talked to Greg McGarity about this probably a couple times.
Now, I think you're forgetting Notre Dame's the second game.
Oh, yeah, you are right.
App State.
So maybe
hey,
you're right.
Why don't you go ahead and sit down on the bench for that one? Take it easy.
Yeah. And actually,
rest up for next week.
Yeah.
We got a big one. We need you.
So it might actually make some sense.
But or maybe they give him a half or a quarter or something like that. I don't know.
This will be a big test though to see how much Kirby Smart has an influence on this whole rule.
Absolutely.
That Georgia has in place, because from my understanding, no other SEC school has this rule. I think it's just a Georgia rule with the one game 10% if you're caught with an infraction with marijuana. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. In these last couple of minutes, we did get a question in on the chat line from Michael Cagle. He says, can you tell us about the DB that transferred in that had to sit out last year? D'Angelo Gibbs' cousin, correct?
Yeah, J.R. Reed.
J.R. Reed, yeah. And the reason I wanted to bring that up is because I've heard good things out of the Georgia camp about him. And with Wilkerson leaving, people forget that J.R. Reed transferred in. So, he's another warm body back there, if nothing else.
Yeah, absolutely. And a guy, hey, if you want to talk about lineage, bloodline,
he's stout, too.
Yeah,
I've seen him.
His dad's Jake Reed, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
His uncle is Dale Carter. You've got Nigel Warrior, D'Angelo Gibbs. They're all a part of this family.
Yeah.
If the bloodline suggests that the kid, I think he's all right.
Yeah.
And like you said, worst case scenario, he's a great thing. He's a great person to have for depth. He's a guy who wanted to be at Georgia. He was a guy who was very influential for D'Angelo to come to Georgia. And they feel like when I was speaking to D'Angelo prior to his commitment last year, they were feeling confident that he's going to get a fair shake in this defensive backfield, and if that's the case, that's great. And another reason, I guess, if we're talking stepping back onto the Wilkerson thing, you brought in a transfer and you're telling him already, he's going to get the shot, and it just didn't bode well for Reggie kind of all around. So, but yeah, JR's a guy I could see getting in there. I don't know that he's necessarily going to end up being a starter. To be honest with you, I have no idea about that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
spring practice.
There's a lot of unknown about this guy.
Yeah.
If nothing else, I do think he can probably be a good rotational player.
Sure.
He's a guy who can get in there, get some snaps, and give some guys some relief. If nothing else, hey, who knows? Maybe he turns into a world beater.
And I'm pretty sure I saw a picture of him, and he's pretty jacked. So if nothing else, you can lay the hit stick on some of those guys on your first string while they're in practice and make sure that they start getting those hits in like they thought they'd be getting from the Alabama and the likes. Jake, we're going to take a quick break, come back and talk a little recruiting, your favorite subject. You're listening to DawgDial presented by UJSports.com.
All right, guys. We will hop into some recruiting here.
Well, we haven't talked about Max Ray.
And we haven't talked about Mecole, though, either, which is we'll save that. We'll save that for our next what do we got here?
775.
Okay, cool. Let's do you want to do Mecole here, and then we'll do recruiting for the next 7?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
3, 2, and welcome back to DawgDial. I'm your host, Paul Maharry, joined by my trusty co-host, Jake Roos of UJSports.com. And, guys, we're sitting here at Champy's Chicken on Baxter Street, eating some great chicken, drinking down some cold beverages, and the TVs are on. It's a fun time. And Friday night, I saw a video on Facebook Champy's posted where they had thousands of crawfish that they had just got done steaming.
Yeah.
And Friday nights at 5 o'clock until they run out. So I would suggest being here at 4:45.
Absolutely,
because this event has taken over Athens.
Yeah. You gotta love some crawfish. It's it goes well with beer as just about as anything.
Yeah.
So not that anything goes poorly with beer though.
And also in the news, we're going to touch on recruiting here in just a second, but Mecole Hardman back in the news. Seems like this 5-star.
For the good reasons.
Correct. Yeah, I was just about to say that, so I'm glad you caught me there. Seems like he's back in the news again, and people are wondering, when's Mecole Hardman going to see the field for the Dogs, Jake?
So Kirby Smart on Bulldog Hotline the other night came out and basically fielded a question regarding that and said one of the primary things that this group is working on, this coaching staff's working on for this year is ways to get him involved. And I totally I don't know why that wasn't a focus last year, but we'll just let it ride. I will attribute that to working on some other things, true freshman quarterback and et cetera. But no doubt about it, it was frustrating for Georgia fans last year to see a guy who so highly touted coming out of high school, a guy who really is one of the most electric athletes I've ever seen on a football field. Really at any level. I saw him go against Demetrius Robertson, who was a 5-star, had an incredible freshman year out of Cal. I've seen the guy take on any number of highly touted defensive backs and really show that, he can hang with the big dogs. Yeah. And so I know it was hard for people to watch. I thought it was hard to watch. I thought that there were times where you could get a guy like that involved. Kirby seems to hint that that a large part of where all this is going to start going and where they're going to start trying to work him in is in the return game. Maybe replacing a little bit of what Isaiah McKenzie did. Reggie Davis is gone, obviously. So give him a chance to get the ball in his hands, get comfortable with that, and make plays, because you're talking about with this guy. Great vision. First off, that's one of the big things I think about Mecole is he's got excellent vision, incredible speed. He's a guy who can just fly down the field, and really just that quick twitch playmaking ability, the chance to make guys miss, and then sometimes in those kick return scenarios, punt return scenarios, it's all about making one guy miss, and he's got the wiggle to do it.
I think what's got Georgia fans really upset is that he was compared so much to Demetrius Robertson, and they saw what Demetrius did at Cal last year, putting up 800 receiving yards, 50-some-odd catches, something like that. Crazy stat line, and they're saying, well, why didn't Mecole do that last year for Georgia? Obviously they had him.
Different player.
Sure.
Different player.
But that's who he gets compared to a lot.
Well,
they're both athletes.
Yeah, I get that because they like I said, they took a lot of reps against each other. They were guys who were familiar with each other and had a chance to compete a lot. But Demetrius was. Demetrius, let's not kid ourselves here, is like almost Olympic fast. He's a freak when it comes to speed. Not to say Mecole's not. He's super quick. He's not as fast as Demetrius, and I don't think he would tell you he was. It's different body types. Demetrius a little bit longer, a little, like I said, a little faster. Obviously, those things all play in. Also, too, you had Demetrius come in and play in a situation that he was a lot more familiar with, which was wide receiver, than Mecole trying to convert to defensive back. And we've heard time and time again, and it's true, the conversion over to defensive back is one of the toughest you can make in football. It's just so much to put in front of you. It's so much to try to take in and try to deal with. And there's so much to learn. So I think that it wasn't necessarily a huge surprise that he struggled in year one, especially trying to make that conversion and try to get all that under his belt. But in year two, I do hope that we're going to see the boost of Mecole Hardman, and I think we can. Now, one thing we've had some people talking about over here that I think is relevant is, does DeAndre Swift somehow start factoring into this situation? I know he's not, obviously the same kind of athlete that Mecole is. He's a true running back. He's a little bit smaller, a little more compact. But a guy that they're relying on to get in there and make some plays. Do you think he's going to get a red shirt this year, or do you think he'll be out there helping Mecole with some of that kick return and such?
It's tough. I mean, he's the type of player that if you redshirt him, it's got to be for a really good reason because he's really good.
He's not sticking around.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, if you're going to redshirt him, it's one of those things where it's almost like you're wasting a year where you could put him on the field. Do I see him fitting that Isaiah McKenzie role? I really don't. I know a lot of people do. I just think he's a little bit more he's bigger than Isaiah was. People seem to think that he's like the same exact size as Isaiah. This Swift is jacked.
Yeah.
I mean, he's like 190, 200 pounds, somewhere around that range. And I just don't see him fitting that same role as Isaiah does. Could he help you out in, some swing passes and things of that nature? Yeah, but you've got to remember, you still have Nick Chubb and Sony Michel. People keep forgetting that. Like, where are you going to put them? You're not going to not have them on the field so you can put a true freshman in, regardless of whether he's a 5-star, 4-star, what have you. And then you've got Brian Harry and Elijah Holyfield, two talented backs in front of them that have been in the weight room for a couple years now. I mean, do I see Swift making an impact this year? Not really, to be honest with you. I mean, you can put him in certain situations, maybe try him out on that kick return. I think redshirting him is just kind of wasting a year, like you said. But no, I mean, if Nick and Sony weren't back, absolutely, yeah, he'd play.
Sure.
But I just don't see a huge role for him this year.
One of the things I guess that I'm glad you mentioned is Sony Michel, and because I think that's DeAndre Swift to me is much closer to Sony Michel than he is to Isaiah McKenzie.
Absolutely.
His style of play, the way that he approaches the game, that kind of thing. That's what role I look for him to take on. And like you said, put him out there. Hey, how great would it be to see a split back set with him and Sony Michel running up and trying to catch a few passes and things like that. That's a couple of tough guys to have to cover. So I don't think that you're necessarily going to see that this year. But I will say it's going to be really interesting to watch Georgia's return game this year. It's in for some big overhaul.
Oh, yeah, it's a lot different than what we've seen in years past with Isaiah McKenzie pretty much manning that for the Dogs. When we come back, though, I promise we're going to talk about recruiting. Jake Roos here, the recruiting expert from UGAsports.com. You're listening to DawgDial, presented by UGAsports.com. Sorry, guys, we wanted to touch on a couple topics right there before we dove into recruiting because I would imagine that we would probably talk about recruiting for this 7-minute segment and probably leak into a little bit of the 5. So we go ahead and get all the team stuff out of the way, and now we'll go directly to
Thanks for all those hearts.
Yeah, somebody's happy that we're going to recruiting. So appreciate all the hearts, guys. Yeah, throw us some thumbs up. Throw us some hearts in here, guys. We really appreciate it. Everybody wants to talk about Max Ray. So, Jake, we're going to talk about Max Ray.
Well, let's talk about it.
All right. And here we go, guys. 3, 2. And welcome back to DawgDial. I'm your host, Paul Maharry, joined by my trusty co-host, Jake Roos of UGAsports.com. Guys, we touched on everything under the map for UGA football, and we still have to talk about the Dogs in the NIT, but that can wait because we've got Jake Roos here, and it's time to talk recruiting. What everybody's wanted, what we get thumbs up for in the chat all the time, and we love all those. We're here at Champions Chicken on Baxter Street. Wanted to throw that in. Josh and Amy Collins, 5 p.m., crawfish. You don't want to miss it.
Friday.
But, recruiting. Georgia is off to a slow start in 2018. Seems like you wrote that article, and then boom, Max Ray drops out. The guy that we thought was going to be committed probably for the entirety of the thing. He said he was not going to take any visits, and then next thing you know, Max Ray is now out of the fold.
Yeah. really,
recruiting is fickle.
It is. It's a fickle mistress. Very surprising, I thought. To lose Max, and I spoke with his father after the decommitment. The reasoning is sound; it makes sense. You hear it a lot, really, and it's not something that fans necessarily love to hear. But the fact of the matter is, when Max committed to Georgia, roughly about a year ago, they were recruiting him the hardest and were his biggest offer.
Yeah. Since
that time, everybody in the country has gotten in on this. I'm talking Alabama. I'm talking Clemson, Tennessee, Oregon. Yeah. Anybody you can think of, they're in. That puts the family in a very interesting situation because, let's be frank about it, the goal in all of this is to put your son in the best position to create a name for himself and ultimately go on to make the NFL. I mean, that's the ultimate goal. I don't know if Georgia would have been that place for Max necessarily. I don't think that was the straw that broke the camel's back. What I'm saying is, of course, the 2017 class was very loaded at his position.
Very.
They brought in 4 guys that they think can play that tackle spot. That's a tough thing to overcome. I mean, Georgia's hoping that at least one of these guys is a long-term answer.
Yeah.
I'm hoping Isaiah Wilson is a 3 to 4 year guy. Andrew Thomas can get in there and do something. Maybe you get a guy, maybe DeMarcus Hayes does it for 2 years, and by that point you've already had to recruit some other tackles. You don't want to get lost in the fold. That's the thing. And so I think from that scenario it was tough. Now, another thing that I've consistently mentioned, and I haven't gotten the family to speak on this, so this is speculative on my part, but the idea of the situation where Georgia told Max, we want 3 players. We want you, we want Jamari Salyer, and we want Trey Hill. Yet the offers continued to go out to a number of offensive tackles. That's a mixed message, in my opinion. Now, I get why you do it, and hey, you see it very clearly when a guy decommits, why you hedge your bets with those other offers. But I know that that's got to be tough for people to kind of marry those two ideas. You really want me, and you're dedicated to me, but you're continuing to look at other options. Well, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to do the same thing. Yeah, I'm going to look around as well. I will say it's a tough loss for Georgia. I do think Max is a fantastic player. He's a great young man as well, and was the leader of this class in terms of what he was doing, the way he was selling the program to other guys. It's going to be interesting to see who picks up that role now, and I don't think that either Donovan Georges or Adam Anderson is going to be that guy. I think that those guys are a little more soft-spoken, a little quieter. Max, again, a guy I'm wishing the best for. I don't think Georgia's totally out of this.
I don't think so.
I got to say, I think that a lot of people are concerned about that being the case. But for a kid to be committed for a full year, there was obviously something he deeply loved about the school. Incredible familiarity with this coaching staff. Incredible familiarity with Athens. The whole family was on board with the decision at one point. I just don't think that it's totally over. Do I love their chances? Not really. I think that Clemson's going to be a very compelling option. Alabama's going to obviously be a compelling option for him. But, is it necessarily a situation where he's going to totally write Georgia off? I don't think so. Sam Ray said as much, said that, if you think Kirby's going to give this up, you're crazy. And I take him at his word. And now we've had questions about his little brother. It's a little ways away, I understand. But I know why people are asking, because the kid's massive. He's a freak, and he's probably going to be, as highly touted as Max. Way too early to speculate on that kind of thing. We've seen these brother things go all kinds of different ways. Riley Ridley plays at Georgia, Calvin Ridley's at Alabama, so on and so forth. So too early to speculate on that. I think the Ray brothers probably end up together in the end, but there's a long way to go before even Max makes his decision.
Do you think, and this is just me kind of speculating, with Max Ray, he hasn't really gotten bigger in terms of weight since we've seen him, and he's kind of stuck at that 280 range. Do you think that had any effect on this at all?
No, I really don't.
I was just wondering.
No, I don't. I think that Max was a guy who was going to be okay, playing around that 290, 295, maybe right at 300.
But is that what Pittman wants?
I think it's okay, because I think that it's a little different from what they've got. You know what I'm saying? I think that he's a little lighter on the feet. I think he's a little more agile. I've seen people who have compared him to guys like Mitch Hyatt. That would be okay.
Yeah.
He's the true dancing bear, I guess. He's a big guy, but he doesn't move like a big guy necessarily. And so I don't necessarily think that kind of took him out of the conversation, or I don't think that took Max out of the conversation for Georgia. I do think that this was a parting that was largely the decision of the family to go out and explore.
One question we've got on the chat line from Ed Pollock. He says, "Who's a better prospect, Max Ray or Dylan Wanham at Tucker High School?"
Oh, that's tough. I guess I would say I'd probably give the nod to Ray as a tackle. I think that Wanham has the potential to play guard, maybe at the next level. I'm not saying that he can't play tackle. I think that he's a very good player and has a great skill set as well. I think for developmental purposes, I would probably prefer Max, just because of his size. He's got room to grow into his body. Wanham's already a big guy. You're going to have to maybe cut some weight on him, kind of slim him up a little bit.
And I've never had a good feeling with Wanham and UGA, even though he's an in-state guy. It's never been that way. way I've talked to him a couple of times, it's Georgia's never really been up there for him. So it'll be interesting to see how they go about that. We've got 5 more minutes left, guys. We're going to take a quick commercial break. You're listening to DawgDial, presented by UGAsports.com.
At some point in this segment, can y'all find a reason to ring the bell?
Yeah, sure.
Christopher White says UGA continue to offer other OTs, but will not be any different than any other school out there. They all do it.
Yeah, absolutely, no question about it. But
you tell it.
But the problem from year to year is it's now listen. People want to talk about, well, Bama does it. Bama stacks these guys up. Listen, Georgia ain't Bama. Nobody's Bama when it comes to recruiting. I'm sorry, that's just the nature of it right now.
Correct.
They are recruiting at a different level than everyone else when it comes to those things. They're able to sell something that nobody else can, which is the fact that every single freshman class that's stuck around for 4 years under Nick Saban has won a national championship. That's a compelling sell for whoever you are. I don't care. This is a situation where I think, another thing to consider about all this is Georgia's O-line play last year was left something to be desired, to put it lightly. You got to see how this is all going to pan out in year 2. Sam Pittman, we know the guy can recruit. We think he's a really good coach. What's he going to be able to do, though, in year 2 with these guys and really get them to where they want to go? I think people are going to be watching that very closely.
Marvin Hudson says all schools will continue to recruit regardless of who committed, and I want to just jump on that before we go to our last segment. Yes, they do. Absolutely, 100%. There's no question that. That's not what we're saying. But when you tell a kid that there's 3 kids that you want, and we only want 1 tackle, and you're the guy, and he's very loyal to you, and he hasn't taken any other visits, and then you start recruiting or you start, offering other kids, it throws off a weird vibe. It's not saying that Georgia shouldn't do it because, you have to hedge your bets.
This is why you do it.
Yeah, this is why you do it. But at the same token, sometimes it backfires on you.
Loyalty begets loyalty.
So, and then somebody, Michael Cagle keeps asking, any danger of losing Rashard Cheney? That's a long ways away, man.
We'll touch on that, I guess, in this last segment.
All
but
right.
Chris White also says can't compare him to Hyatt. That kid started his freshman year on the national championship team. I agree with you. I'm just saying, I've heard other people make that comparison. I don't think he's Mitch Hyatt.
No.
I've had a chance to see them both, and Mitch Hyatt's a freak.
Correct. Let's go into this. Let's talk a little more recruiting, and then I kind of want to talk some NIT. So,
Okay.
3, 2. And welcome back to DawgDial. I'm your host, Paul Maharry, joined by my trusty co-host, Jake Roos of UGAsports.com. And we've been talking all things UGA football and UGA football recruiting, and we'll just get right back into UGA football recruiting. People asking, Zamir White, question keeps popping up in Facebook. Jake, feel like we answer this every week. Any new news?
We're going to keep answering that, I promise you, until June and well after that mark as well. This is a kid who everybody in the country wants. Everybody wants a piece of Zamir. We know Georgia does. Obviously, they've made him a priority. They've really been pushing hard. No recent update as to where things stand with him. No big changes or anything like that. I know that based on everything that we've been told and that we've heard, I think Georgia feels good about their chances. And as well they should. They got the kid on campus back-to-back weekends. They're in a situation where the depth at running back after Nick Chubb and Sonny Michel leave is up in the air. So, there's a lot to sell to Zamir. We've touched on that before. I think Georgia's got as compelling a pitch as anybody out there. And I will say it is March, and he commits in June, and it's going to be a long road. And even after that.
Something tells me that we're going to head on up there. We're going to make a road trip very soon to go see Zamir in terms of when that commitment comes about.
Sure.
There's going to be news outlets from Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, Tennessee, pretty much every school in the nation. Probably will send somebody there because that's how talented he is. Jake, I'm going to give you a minute. Recruiting hot minute. Here you go. I'm going to ring the bell.
All right.
Give him a minute of juice
Okay.
before I talk about Georgia basketball.
All right. We've had a few questions about Rashad Cheney. Good question. 2019 kid just committed to the Bulldogs very recently.
People are already asking, can he leave?
Yeah, people are already asking, will he decommit? Too early to speculate on that. I don't think so, personally. He called Georgia his dream offer, said that's the one he wanted, knows that the depth on the defensive line is one that they massively need. It's a situation where they've got to have somebody, especially going forward. He can be the future of that. And I think that he sees what the idea is for this 2019 class going forward. how he can be an integral part of it and be one of the guys who's kind of the foundation layers for it. So I'm not worried about Rashad Cheney.
I'm not worried about
yet.
2019 period.
I can't even think about 2019.
Yeah.
I'm just now like about halfway through deleting the 2017 names from my brain.
They're still there for me.
So, but yeah, don't worry too much about Cheney just yet. I will say though, incredible start to 2019 for Georgia if all these guys hang around.
And I'll take over from here. Georgia basketball playing Belmont NIT. It's going to be a crazy game, I think. A couple stats on Belmont just for you guys who are not aware of who they are. They are in 22-6. They are 15-1 in conference. They were first place in their conference. They did not win their conference, so they did not get to go to March Madness, which a lot of people thought they were going to. But they're a pretty talented team. They're led by Evan Brads. He is a 6'7" power forward, center, whatever you want to call it, averaging 20 and 9 a game. That's going to be a big matchup for Ogbede and Yante Mayton down low. They've got a couple other guys averaging double figures, 11 points apiece for Amanzi Ikigi and Taylor Barnett. Both of those guys, though, really are, just kind of average for them. So their big threat is going to be Evan Brads. Three-point ball, they are very good, 47% from behind the arc. That's always a problem for teams in any of these tournaments, whether it be NIT or March Madness. There's always something going on with three ball in these tournaments that you have to watch out for. But big guy down low, I don't really like that for Georgia, but at the same token, I think Mayton and Obede can lock down that paint pretty well. I think the three ball is a little worrisome with the 2 and 3 guards that Georgia has if they can get out there and contain. I don't think Georgia will have any problem in this game. I think they'll probably move on, potentially play Georgia Tech, who's playing really good basketball. They did not make it into the tournament, but if they do, that game will be played in Georgia Stegman Coliseum. So, I think Georgia has a way to get to 20 wins this year for Mark Fox, and lo and behold, a month ago we were talking about, we were all but close to putting 3 or 4 guys on a hot board,
Yeah.
And now, Georgia's Mark Fox might make it a little further in the NIT.
Here's a secret. We already had the hot board built.
And with that, we're out of here, guys. This is DawgDial, presented by UGASports.com.
Thanks for tuning in.